Today, we're going to continue what we talked about. I think it was back in November. I canceled the one for December. But we started talking about measurements. It's a great topic that everyone I think can benefit from. So before we kind of talked about what are measurements, how do you do simple stuff like set scale? If you want to go back and watch the video on that, or probably most people know that by now. But we're going to kind of move on to today's topic. Is going to be almost exclusively on legends, and then how do you use legends to make an estimate for a plan set. And I would say legends are very, very powerful, but they're a little bit finicky in Bluebeam, unfortunately. So there's just a bunch of settings that if you haven't done a lot of legends, just make sure that you're kind of checking them the right way. And you can pretty easily make a mistake or maybe come up with a quantity that is wrong for a reason that you didn't quite understand. I would say that I struggled with them quite a bit when I first started using them. And it took a while to really kind of get to the point where I feel pretty confident with them. And if something doesn't make sense, then I know why it doesn't make sense. But yeah, so that's what we're going to focus on today. A little bit more about legends, what can be added up in a legend. And I guess I didn't really even explain what a legend is. A legend is a way to add up different measurement, scale to sketch, or counts within Bluebeam. So within Bluebeam, there are all sorts of different measurement things you can do. Mostly what we use are length, poly length, area, and sometimes probably not even perimeter very much. And then we will use the counts as well. But another thing you can actually do is use these scale to sketch. These orange ones, they're great for drawing stuff out if you know the dimensions, drawing it to scale. But you could theoretically use these for measurements as well. The intro for today is actually going to also focus on something that's going to build into legends. And what the intro is going to be about is styles, and then also like how different properties of different quantities and just any type of markup, how it works and how it can impact your legend. Just to start off, what are our properties bar and then what are styles? Now, if I click on pretty much anything in Bluebeam, a text box, there's two ways to get to properties. There's going to be a properties bar here at the top. This is like a quick properties. It doesn't have all the properties that you could use, but it has many of them, pretty much all the ones you probably need to use. But you can also click on this little gear right here on the left side of your screen, or you could theoretically right click and go to properties at the very bottom. And that's going to bring up this properties bar. And this will have additional properties that are not included in this property bar at the top. So these are very important for legends to understand how to change these properties and how they actually can impact your legend. So I'm going to kind of delete this legend here, but I'm going to look at as an example these 4 measurements. Just to note, this first one here, I can kind of just sort of walk through what the properties are on this thing. Turn off that little one right here, just to kind of make it a little bit simpler to see. But this, you can see it has a pink line with 100% transparency, this line style, this thickness of line, fill, here's the transparency on the fill. So there's a lot of different things that can be different, I would say. Like if I copy this over and I just now make this 10% transparency, these two things they look the same, but they are very slightly different. This is a 10% transparency on fill, and this has a 20% transparency on fill. Now, to me, as a normal user, that doesn't seem like much of a difference. That seems like if I made a legend, well, those would be counted the same. But Bluebeam does not think that way. Bluebeam thinks if there's any difference at all in the style or in one of the other items that are being built into your legend, it treats it as a different quantity. So I'll kind of show you real quick how that would work. So these, again, this has a 10% fill, this has a 20% fill. If I click on this and I hold shift, click on that, I'm going to right click and create a legend, and I'm going to create a new legend. You can see it did not add those together. It's showing them as 2 different items. One, you can see a very slightly different fill, and this one has, again, just the slightest difference is going to impact it. So if I increase this, you can see which one is which. But if I wanted these to be counted together, they would have to be the exact same. So I'd have to make this 20% fill. And the second I do that, they get combined together. So this, again, very finicky thing with Bluebeam, but you just need to be careful that you're using the exact same style for everything. Now, style is pretty handy in that there's actually a tool to match the style from one to another. So, for example, say I just make this significantly different. I got green in here, I got an orange background. You're not going to make that mistake of thinking these might be the same. You clearly know they're different. But if I wanted to match the properties of one thing to another, I can click on the thing that I want as my base, and I click on this little format painter icon, and I click on the thing I want to change, and it will automatically change to the same style. So yeah, that's a really cool little trick you can do. But again, the big point I want you to take away from is that with the legend, style really, really matters. If you're drawing stuff, make sure it's the exact same style, and make sure your stuff is actually being added up together in your legend. And the real way this can mess you up big time is if, I'll show you an example. Say, for example, I want to make another 17-inch pavement repair. Actually, let me delete this one here first. Okay, so I got one 17-inch pavement repair right here, and it's giving me that 3.97 square feet. Now, if I decide I want to do another one, because it's the exact same style, just by copying it over, it knows that I want that to be in my legend. Now, this is where it gets a little bit confusing. This one right here is the exact same subject. It has all the same properties, although it has a different style. So my question would be like, why did it not include this particular item in my legend? Why is it not including these three? They should all be the same, right? They're the same thing except for a different style. And the reason is because if you have items that are different styles, it only adds them in if they were the same at one point and then they change. So for example, if I right click on this and go to legend and add that to my legend right here, it will add it in. And then I can go in and change the style to orange and change the style fill to green. And now it's going to add it in. But originally it thought I really just wanted this pink one to be in my legend. So I guess my point is just be careful with the style. It really can throw you off with these legends. And make sure if you want to add up something, make sure it's the same style. Now, another thing you have to be careful of is the legend itself has different columns in it. I'm going to just highlight these two things right here. I'm going to create a legend from this. There's two ways to create a legend. The way I'm doing it right now is actually not what I would recommend. This is the easiest way. So I'll show you how to do this first, and I'll show you a way next that I think would be better to be doing it and what I would recommend for our estimates. But I'm going to go down here and do create new legend. And again, so it's counting up this item and it's counting up this item. Okay, so looking at my legend, you can see what are the columns in my legend. And the columns are description, quantity, and unit. Now, going back to my properties tab over here, I can adjust these by hitting this edit columns item. You can see I have description, quantity, and unit checked. I could help. Sometimes you might want to have subject checked. Sometimes you might want to have length or area or label or whatever you want to have in there checked. But whatever is checked in here is going to impact how it adds things together. To start with, this legend does not have the column of label checked. I'm going to write it right here. There is no label in my legend. When Bluebeam does these quantities, it doesn't really care if the label is different because it's not in my legend. So when I click on this one, you can see my label is 17-inch AC pavement repair. Click on this one, same exact label. Now, remember I showed you if I change the fill to something brown, it's going to make a new unit here. I'm going to show you something different. Now, what if I change the label? Is it going to do anything? So I'm going to just call this different. 17-inch pavement repair different. I hit the answer. I hit that and it doesn't. It's still adding them up together. Well, the question is, why doesn't label matter? What does matter? And the answer is, what matters is what columns are in your legend. So for example, if I change the unit, because I have unit as one of my columns, that will separate this out. So I'm going to click on units up here and change my area to square feet. And now it's separated those out as two different things. So just like the style really matters, looking at your legend and the columns that you have in your legend, try to make sure everything is exactly the same, or your legend can give you answers that are not really what you want. I'm going to now add in that label to my column and show you how it will impact. So I'm going to add this in as label. Now, these are the same label, but if I now, because the label is in my list of columns, now the legend is looking at that as it's something that might separate out my units. So I'm going to change this one to label different, and now it makes them separate. So it's, again, the two things that drive separating out your items. And I guess the third one was the type of measurement that you made. Did I make a regular line here? Did I make a poly line here that I draw in as this type of line? I guess these aren't measurements. So I guess it would really be more a length, a poly length, or one of these. So yeah, it all kind of matters. So legends are finicky is the big takeaway here. And in my example here, this is actually a rectangle sketch to scale, and I have it added into my legend here. Another thing you can do with legends is you can change up the settings of your legend. You can change how it looks. So by clicking on this legend, I'm going to look in my properties bar here, and I can change, as I showed you before, the columns that are in here. One really cool thing, and this might be a potential future discussion, or maybe it's a little bit too fancy, but you can actually make in custom columns in here, and you can have it add up things. So you could have a unit cost in your legend, and then you could have it calculate your quantity times your unit cost, and you could come up with a dollar value. So that's a really cool thing you could theoretically do with legends. You can change the boldness. You can change just how it looks. You can add in grid lines, all sorts of different things you can do with the legend. But one other thing that I really want to stress, this is super important. I would say it's even as important as making sure your style and your columns and all that stuff match, is really looking at this source pages in here. This is super, super critical. And one of the things I feel like I screw up the most is what data is the legend pulling from. So this source pages can either pull from all pages, current page, or a custom range. And I usually set this to all pages. And that would, if I was doing a big estimate, that means that I can have this same legend, and I'll get to this when I show off the 60% and the estimate here in a bit, but you can have this same legend on multiple sheets, and it's going to calculate all the quantities of all the sheets. So that's usually how I end up doing it. However, you could have it alternately add up the source page could be your current page, and your current page would just add up the quantities for that particular sheet. So that can also be a really valuable thing to do. However, this is something that you just need to make sure is set the way you want it to be. And it can backfire on you if you think it's calculating one thing, but it's actually calculating something else. Okay, so I mentioned a little bit before, you have to be careful to make sure that all of your markups are being added into your legend. So for example, let me just delete this legend here. If I highlight these two items and I right click on them, create legend, create new legend, this thing is not being added in here. This length is also not being added in here. This thing is also not being added in here. The question you should be asking is, do I really have to highlight these every single time? This is super annoying. Isn't there a better way? And I would say yes. Highlighting and creating legends that way, while it is intuitive and very easy, it is not the best way to do it. The best way is to use your tool chest, and you can actually have a tool set linked to a legend. I like our civil measuring tools. I think this is a great way to do quantities, and this is what I've been using. But if I start doing all of my measurements using this, I'm not making anything that's not in this measurement list, and you click on this little gear right here, you can actually create a legend from this tool set. And what that's going to do is, if I create a new legend, anything that I build in here and drop into my drawing is then going to be added automatically to my legend. I don't need to highlight anything. It's just automatically, everything that's linked to this is going to work. So kind of create a new legend. Right now I got nothing in here, but if I start adding stuff in, it starts automatically adding in, and all the names are all right. And this is, I would say, the way to make sure that you don't end up with situations where the shading is a tiny bit different, or you forgot to highlight something. If you just go off of this tool set, that's the way to go. That's what I would recommend everyone do, is start with this. Now, what if you get to a situation where there's something in here that doesn't actually work for you. You get to a situation where you have a quantity that's not in this tool set, but you want to add it to your plans. Well, this should be a shared, if you're in Pbot, this should be a shared tool set that you can theoretically add to. Now, I think people have been adding to it, so I'm hopeful that we have the vast majority of stuff in here, but it's kind of a living tool set. And if I add something new in here, it will get incorporated into this tool set. So I could, add a test one in. I'll just add a test one in right now. Make up one here. Add this to my tool set, and now see it automatically added in that link measurement right there. It should have showed up right at the bottom of here. You can make edits to the tool set, and it will reflect in this legend here. Another thing that I think is pretty slick about this tool set is that there is also a legend that's already kind of set up in here for you. You can go ahead and click on it, drop it in. The formatting should hopefully be correct. Actually, I think there's even another one here in here. I guess I should say there's a couple legends that are already built in. Just click on them, and you should be able to drop them in. They should already be linked to this tool set. So hopefully everything's kind of set up for you. I would say this is the first big project that I've done, just my estimate, just using Bluebeam. I've been very skeptical of this idea. And the couple of things that I was worried about was the accuracy, because using CAD, you can be more accurate. If you have a curve, when I'm doing in curves here, there's a sense in which I'm not perfectly accurate. You can even see it's like it's that I get my PT in the exact spot is that really exactly right? No, there's a sense in which Bluebeam is not as accurate as CAD. So I would say that's the first thing you should be thinking about. And then the second thing you should be thinking about is when I move to my next estimate, how do I swap out sheets? Isn't that going to be a problem? Can I just copy over these markups? How is that going to work? So those are my two big questions kind of going into this. But what I would say is I found it to be faster than I thought it was going to be to do. I thought MicroStation would be a lot faster, but after doing this in Bluebeam, I'm like, oh, this was actually pretty good. And I think the visualizing of it really helped me in a way that MicroStation, it's not as visual, I would say, and especially not per sheet. And then thirdly, I was able to add it to the Bluebeam session and have everyone look at how I actually did the calcs. And I think that actually gave me some good feedback as well with the review. So I would say I really liked it at the end of the day. I was pleasantly surprised. But as I was kind of mentioning before, what I did is I went to my tool set, the 2020 Civil Measuring Tools General, and I just added anything that I needed. I would add in here, or I would just grab stuff from here. I just started populating them out. Again, use this little gearbox and created my legend right here. You can see it has that same name, which the name will kind of populate when you drop it in here. And then you can have a running tally as you're going. And again, I have this one set as source all pages, but I could theoretically change this to current page as well. And then once you have one of them in here, I guess you can just right click on it and then go to this apply to pages. And actually, why don't I just go ahead and delete all of them right now? I'll just delete all my legends. I got no legends in here right now. I'm gonna go back to my page one here, and again, go to here, legend, create new legend, just drop it in. And again here, I think I have this as source page as 1. So that's not really what I want. So I'm gonna set this to all pages. And so it kind of pulls all of them in here. And then I'm gonna right click and go to apply to pages. You can do this for any markup if you want to have something on every page in your document. Apply to all pages, and it's asking me which pages I want it on. And hit OK here, and now every page that I kind of drop this in the same spot, which I might want to move it around a little bit. But these are all kind of copies of each other. So the interesting thing with legends is that this legend is kind of linked to all the other legends. So if I wanted to look at the current page for this one, if I go to the next page, it also changed that one to current. You can't have one be one thing and one be the other. They're all going to be the same. But my method for going through and drawing these out is how it looks. I went into my tool set. This is mono curb and sidewalk. Yeah, it's just literally a matter of coming in, finding mono curb and sidewalk, and then you can kind of snap as best as you can and draw that in. Probably need to add a couple curves in here. Same with this side. So there are some times where you can't quite grip it the way you want. You may be moving a couple of things out of the way to get the curve in the way you want. I know some people aren't a huge fan of the curves. So if you wanted to add in kind of manual points in here instead of curves, like a bunch of points, you could do that as well. There's not really a right way to do this, I would say. Just try to be as accurate as you can. And then just also know that it's not going to be ever as accurate as MicroStation. So that's kind of one concern. But in terms of visualizing this, I think it's really, really powerful. The last thing I kind of wanted to show after you kind of get through how you draw everything out, the thing I wanted to show is what happens when you did all this work on an estimate and you're as you're working on the estimate, you realize some issues with your plans. You kick stuff over to your drafter to make some changes, and then now they've given you new sheets. But the problem is you've drawn all your estimate on old sheets. How do you fix that? What do you do? And there is a really cool ability to swap out the sheets but leave the markups in here. This is really a game changer if we're wanting to use this method for multiple iterations of plan reviews. So what you do is you can highlight one sheet, you can highlight all the sheets, but I'm just going to show you with one sheet here. If you want to go to your page, your thumbnails here, and you want to right click and go to replace pages. I'm going to swap this out to a 30% plan set. This is where it's kind of asking you, okay, you want to remove page 2 from 2 to 2, and then it's asking you which page you want to drop in there instead. I'll be honest, I can't actually remember which page I want to drop in there. So let me double click on this real quick. Okay, so I do want to drop in page 2. So I click OK, and this is a really important checkbox to make sure you have. If you click on this replace page content only, that means it's not going to replace any of the markups. So I'm going to click on that. Now you can see everything's a little bit off here, and that's because the pages didn't line up perfectly. My drafter moved some stuff. So you may actually need to copy and slide everything over a little bit. But in general, if you're making small changes, this works really, really well. You can just swap out the page. Everything should line up in the same spot. If your drafter has moved some stuff around, you might need to move everything over a little bit as well. But in general, I thought this is a super slick thing that you can do to progress from markup to markup or any plan changes.